Welcome back. I'm now joined by Eric Froelich. Eric, what have you made? You've been watching the first two matches, right? What have you made of them?
Um, I actually thought I agreed with basically everything that you and Chris had to say in that second match. The lines that Chris suggested for Steve to take are definitely the lines that I would have taken. I felt like so far in this match, Steve has outdrawn Luis drastically. Like, not even
Okay.
close. I don't even know that Luis has had like a decent hand yet. He's had a lot of
The
hands.
turn one Tinker Kill hand, you can't complain
That hand
about
was
too much.
terrible, but it could win turn one. Of course, I mean,
Sure. He had no choice but to go for it, but he went for it and
right.
it worked. So I don't know, is
And
that a
that
good
hand on
hand
the
or a bad
draw
hand?
is a snap mulligan because you just get blown out by so many things, the pyroblast, fluster storms, all that other stuff. So that was a gamble hand. Luis actually messaged me afterwards that he went with a timing tell, like because he played the Black Lotus, and Steve is of course famous for tanking
Yeah.
as much as humanly possible. Didn't even consider force of willing it. He's like, yeah, he doesn't have force of will, just jams,
Wow, really?
which is smart.
That's
It's a good idea.
awesome.
But I mean, he's going for it either way with the hand that he had. But it is interesting that if his hand wasn't quite what it was, that it may have impacted his decision a little bit. So who knows on that one? But yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting match. Of course, yeah, the draws have been extremely lopsided. I feel like, but go either way.
We've gotten the maximum possible magic. That's it. That's the theme of the league, right? Just more magic. Three games, three games.
I mean, there was no way that this one was going to go down in three. I mean, reasonable chance we go down in four, but we will see. I mean,
We'll see.
there's going to be a lot gained in game one on the die roll, I imagine, and yeah, I don't even know what to say, like, because I don't know how Steve's going to continue to play out. Like Chris said at the end of the match that he thinks that Steve is not going to give Luis a bunch of time like he did before. I don't know if that's true. Like that's just Steve's style. So if Steve's going to completely change up his style, is that less edge to Luis because it didn't work that he didn't jam game one, or that last match, or is it a big edge to Luis because now Steve is not in his comfort zone? Like I don't know. There's so many different dynamics that are kind of at play.
We shall see. Let's get down to the game. Yeah, I do think that, Steve clearly played that third game more aggressively than he played the second one. I don't know if it's the difference between young Pyromancer and Delver. Maybe he feels like with a young Pyromancer, he's able to kill so much quicker than he can kill with a Delver that he's willing to go for it and just like defend Grafdigger's cage long enough.
Well, having the cages and having his hand was 8 counter spells or whatever in game two. So I don't know. I don't know exactly his thought process. Like I said, I think that game two was borderline unlosable, and so it got lost. So,
wow,
it's one of those things where, yeah, like he feels so safe behind those wall of counters, but it's just not how things are. Like that's not the world we live in.
All right, looks like LSV is on the play, if I'm not mistaken. He's going to keep that.
Pure force of will.
Oh, Menendian's on the play. Luis can't actually tinker on the first turn because he has to use his blue mana to cast the Soul Ring.
You're right.
But, any mocks off the top. Oh, Steve's on the play, and Steve mulliganed. Mulligan to 5, in fact.
Yeah. Luis isn't going to be under any pressure to win immediately anyway, but...
Right. Yeah, you just run Soul Ring here, right? Rather than Preordain?
I think I would Preordain getting Underground, and then kind of set yourself up, and then you can upkeep Vamp Tutor for, Lotus if you want to, or something along those lines, depending on what you see.
I run out Soul Ring.
No.
Soul Ring turns on turn 2 Tinker, turns on turn 2 Jace.
True. Good points.
And what is Steve should just run out Trigon, right?
Yeah, against Soul Ring. He's
absolutely
kind of
against Soul Ring. He's even got a Flusterstorm to defend this with.
Yeah, the Flusterstorm is big.
Hilariously, the Soul Ring can pay for it. Right? Isn't it only the second 2 spells, or did I miss a spell?
It's not.
Oh, Flusterstorm would have been the 3rd spell, right? Hilarious. So Luis did not go for the Force of Will, though. He was willing to just
gonna
let
jam
Trigon resolve because, you know what? He's got more important things to worry about and defend with his Force of Will. He goes for Jace.
Now. I imagine he will, but
Jace bouncing Trigon. He could have gone for Tinker there. He chose not to. Jace is going to bounce Trigon. That Lightning Bolt in Menendian's hand is actually pretty good here.
Yeah.
It's one of the rare times it does anything in this match, but it does kill a Jace.
Yep. Menendian tapping his red, it's signifying that he has the bolt. I believe he did it right during his turn.
Why did he not bolt end step? Oh, he wanted to have Flusterstorm to defend it. Sure. Yeah, he signaled the bolt end step, but then signaled, no, I'm not going to lightning bolt you. So, more tells than your average Magic Online match. The main deck Hercules. Not a great card. Luis with a handful of gas, though. He should be fine.
Yeah, for sure.
He goes for Preordain instead of Tinker. Now this Tinker can get Flusterstormed.
True. Nothing to do about that.
That's actually kind of awkward here.
His hand is so good with, like, he's fine with, like, getting Ancestral Recall even countered. Because he has Vamp Tutor and Demonic Tutor, we're looking at being able to basically set up Lotus Yawgmoth's Will, which is going to just win the game with, all the gas he has. Steve is down to 2 cards when he makes that play. And so there's no real hand that he's afraid of. Luis is at 18 life. Knows one of the cards is Trigon Predator.
Yeah, I mean, this Treasure Cruise is probably the best card Steve can have. I mean, Treasure Cruise or Ancestral. The only problem is that, Luis knows the last card's a Trigon, so he knows that he can force a will, whatever that card is.
So Luis can he just win right now?
Well, he doesn't do upkeep anything. He's just going to Ancestral for value.
Sure.
And then he's got Thoughtseize if he wants it. He can Thoughtseize and play a Mox for Vampiric. He could Demonic off the Mana Crypt in the Mox. He's got options.
Luis is a man with options.
What do you get here? Oh, he just gets Yawgmoth's Will. He's just setting up for next turn.
Sure.
Didn't even bother to Thoughtseize. That's hilarious. He could have Thoughtseized the Trigon, but I think he wants Menendian to tap out. He's like, if you want to tap out for Trigon, that's awesome. I no longer have to worry about what the last card in your hand is.
Right. What this allows him to do is, Vamp Tutor and upkeep for Lotus if he wants it. Actually doesn't need it, but it is good. And he has the Thoughtseize, so...
Yeah, you totally upkeep Vampiric Tutor. He's going to Vampiric Tutor to put Black Lotus on top of his deck. That seems like absolutely the right play.
Yep.
Plus 5 and even Storm count.
There's nothing Steve can even have with 1 card. We're looking at...
Correct. Yeah, this game's over. Luis is going...
He didn't even have to cast the Thoughtseize. He got to save the mana to continue going off with.
Yep, Luis is about to resolve Yawgmoth's Will. All his deck, his game 1, plan A is Tendrils of Agony. He just wants to play, in this case, it'll be 9 spells in the same turn. Go get his Tendrils of Agony and point it at Steve's face. Plan A is going to get the job done here.
Yeah, and on the off chance that he somehow couldn't get to 9 spells, he still has that Tinker and Soul Ring that we saw earlier in the graveyard, so he could just do that. He could, we know he cast a bunch of spells already, but, Demonic Tutor for Time Walk and just kill him with White Steel Colossus. Doesn't even need to Time Walk, it's just Colossus.
He's tinkering out the Light Steel. Oh, he can DT for Time Walk here? He may have been a little tight on mana. Yeah, it may have been that he couldn't get to both 9 spells and 4 mana. That happens sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many spells he casts. He casts Vampiric Tutor, Black Lotus, Yawgmoth's Will, Thoughtseize, replay Black Lotus, replay Soul Ring, Demonic Tutor. Yeah, that might have only been 7, but he still had mana floating, so he could have just won that game, right? Because he still got to play a land, and you might have forgotten that he had a land drop.
Oh, well, he's got Abrupt Decay for the Trigon anyway, so his line is
of course
plenty good enough.
A little extra style points. I just want to figure out for myself whether he could have actually won that game with the alternate kill condition of Tendrils of Agony.
All right, so Luis takes a game 1 lead here. We're in match number 3. It's best 3 out of 5. They've split the first 2, so now it's effectively best 2 out of 3 matches.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to get your take. I've asked both Bob and Chris what you would do with Luis's sideboard. And I guess you and he played the same 75. I mean, you came to similar conclusions about the format and then wound up tuning your decks together for the playoffs. Is this just a no-brainer go with the Oath plan every time, or is it more complicated than that?
It's more complicated than that.
Okay.
The problem, of course, being exactly what Bob highlighted. The Graph Digger's cages are good against every strategy.
Yeah, let's go back to the game, by the way. I don't think we have time for deck lists, so
Sure.
totally fine. You can keep talking here.
The Yawgmoth's Will, the Tinker, and the Oath of Druids are all reliant on things that Graph Digger's Cage is going to shut down. So you already need answers for those. The Oath it really just depends on how Steve is going to play. We saw him not jam his creatures. We saw him jam his creatures. He wasn't playing creatures at all, like literally just discarding them rather than playing threats, which might have been why Luis, I think he boarded out when he boarded in the Notion Thief. I think he had Oaths not in his deck. Oathing into Notion Thief is not a disaster. It's certainly something that you can do. And
funny.
It's not like it puts you in a terrible spot, but obviously not great.
Sure.
My advice to Luis was to board in, of course, the Flusterstorm, because it's great. And I liked a couple copies of Oath and one copy of Gristlebrand because I think the Tinker and Colossus are so good against Steve's list. He has no way to deal with the Resolve Colossus, which is rare for vintage decks. So this is one of those matchups where if you Oath into Colossus, if you do that sometimes against Delver, you may not get the job done. Like they may have Hurkyl's Recall, Steel Sabotage, some way to handle things. But wow, Luis again just
my god, he just took Grizzlebrand and Blightsteel Colossus back to back. That is miserable.
It is actually unbelievable. Some of these draw steps that Luis has had this match.
Yeah,
this series of matches. Like his last game was quite good.
Jeez, he kept a one-lander, and now he's just he did have a way to get Blightsteel back into his deck at least. The discards phase with 8 cards in his hand.
Yeah, that's not the most exciting.
No, definitely not. Menendian, meanwhile, has a Lotus, has some card drawing, has plenty of land.
So what would you place the odds of Luis drawing Blightsteel Colossus this
I just saw the same comment in the chat. That's hilarious.
I think it's a lot higher than the 1 out of 52 that it should be. I put it a solid 1 in 6.
He's going to all the fatties this much. He could have played a show and tell.
Yeah, Steve's draw game 1 was abysmal as well. So
yeah,
if it's forced to go down to a game 3 to even it out for bad luck, I think Luis will take it because he will get to be on the play for that game. So if that's going to happen, this was good sequencing for him at least.
All right, well, here's Trigon Predator. Do you fight this if you're Luis? Is it worth a Force of Will?
The reason why you might is because you don't want to discard, but he already has so many. He keeps drawing the worst card in his deck every turn, so he's got easy discards.
What do you think of Luis's keep?
I think it's fine. He's on the draw.
One lander on the draw with no card drawing. You just keep it.
I don't know that you quote unquote just keep it. I mean, if you're going to draw Gristlebrand and Blightsteel, it's pretty bad. But I mean, like the hand is good at playing for the late game a little bit. Flusterstorm's extremely strong. Gush and the Force of Wills are quite good, and you have the Abrupt Decays. He had 1, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, what he had was 2 Force of Wills and a Flusterstorm to fight off Menendian's typical, mystical for ancestral, set up a treasure cruise. Menendian's plan A is always an avalanche or card advantage.
Right.
So having 2 Force of Wills and a Flusterstorm is decent against that, but Steve just played land, kind of played draw go for a couple turns, and Luis was suddenly discarding.
I mean, he's not under the most pressure in the world. There's certainly ways to draw out of this, but each turn that goes by where he's just discarding, it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
No surprise.
We have to go to game 3. It's more Magic. Just have to play the maximum. If we're going to get to 15 games? We've been talking about whether it's 4 matches or 5 matches. I don't know if we even contemplated 15 games.
Oh, it's been contemplated. Just trying to make plans for tonight. It was contemplated. I've got Brock Parker living with me wanting to do something tonight. He's like, so what time is this going to end? I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, give me a ballpark. I'm like, I can't. we have Steve Menendian playing, and it could go 5 matches. Like, if it was me versus Luis, I'd tell you it'd be over between 8 and 8:30. Here, I'll tell you it's over between 8:30 and 2 a.m. Like, what can I even say?
Pace of play has actually been quite nice. I'm
Yes.
very happy with the way Steve's been playing in terms of. I mean, he's thought about a couple of key decisions, but
I'm a little unsure about Luis's decision to discard the Mana Crypt. I think it was a little short-sighted, where he could discard Abrupt Decay potentially, or maybe Hercule's Recall, depending. But if he does draw Tinker off the top and he had Mana Crypt, he's got double Forcible backup, which is pretty insane. Obviously, it's really loose against Flusterstorm, but it is something. Like, it is one of his better routes to victory, I feel like.
I'll buy that. Steve going for Treasure Cruise. Luis finally has something to point Force of Will on a blue card at.
Yeah.
Steve's going to gush as a response.
He's probably not going to discard this turn.
Wow. Flusterstorm's just kind of what he wanted there. Doesn't even have to use this other Force of Will.
Right.
And Luis's 1 mana that he's been playing the whole game with is tapped from his main phase Brainstorm, so can't even Flusterstorm back. Sure feels like match 3 is going to game 3.
Yeah, that's a bold prediction, but I'm with you, I think.
All right. Flusterstorm did stop the first Force of Will, but Luis has another one. But so does Steve. Force back. Treasure Cruise is going to resolve. That's a big fight to win. And Steve was already ahead, and now he's just that much farther ahead. Luis's hand is gone from full of counters to empty of counters.
Yeah.
Young Pyro comes down here and a Grafdigger's Cage. He's going to Brainstorm fetch land. That actually seems pretty reasonable here. Jeez. And Trigon chips away. Well, he's down to 12. He does not have many more turns.
Yeah, this is a rough spot, obviously. I mean, most of his mana sources don't even produce green. So, drawing, like, a lot of the mana sources in this deck are, of course, artifacts. So,
yeah, if he draws a tropical or a fetch land right now, then he can Abrupt Decay Young Pyro, Abrupt Decay Trigon, and still kind of be in it. But, I mean, he's got to turn those Abrupt Decays on before Young Pyromancer starts spitting out a bunch of tokens, and that seems kind of unlikely at this point. Yeah, Menendian's not even going to let him cast a Preordain.
Yeah, that puts this game out of reach. Against Luis's specific hand. I'm not sure if it always does, but definitely against what Luis is holding, that puts him on no outer.
Second Young Pyromancer.
First Gush.
2 tokens. Yeah, this game's over. All right. Game number 3. The Strip Mine. For the perfect victory. No permanents on your side. I guess he does have cards in hand. You didn't get him to no permanents and no cards.
That will be hard.
It's hard, but I mean, that's the perfect victory.
And no graveyard, too?
That's not that hard in this format. I guess they always have, like, the 1 card, like the Dig or the Cruise.
It is likely.
Jeez. On to game 3.
I did not realize until I see the little picture of Steve's deck where his hand used to be that he's only playing 3 Treasure Cruises.
Yeah.
But, it's definitely going to put him in a slightly tougher spot than I would have thought he'd be in this matchup. Obviously, Treasure Cruise, pretty good. Pretty good card.
All right, we've been talking about the deck list, so we looked at Steve's. Here's Luis.
It's a good deck list. I like
it. Yeah, we can look at Menendians too.
My big issue with with what makes this matchup tough is that your 4 mana cards are so powerful, Notion Thief and Jace both, but they both also just die to Pyroblast, which is rough. I mean, he's got 3 of them. Like, that's a huge swing. Like, you can't really defend your 4 mana card against a 1 mana card very well. Like, you don't really want to be force willing it through. And of course, Steve has so many other counter spells that are effective that it's a tough spot for both Jace and Notion Thief, despite being extremely powerful.
All right, let's get down. Game number 3 to determine match number 3. One of these guys gets to pull within a match of being the titleist, first ever Vintage Super League champion. Feels like the right 2 guys to be playing for it. We were talking about this earlier, but one of these guys was in first place every week of the season. I mean, there was obviously a massive tie early, but Menendian was the last undefeated, and then he and Luis traded first back and forth through sort of the middle third of the league, the last third of the league. They played a tiebreaker for the 1 seed. Menendian did win that tiebreaker to officially win the regular season, but this is the match that really matters.
Luis, of course, start off on 2 completely playable hands, as per usual, and
yeah, he's down to 5 cards.
And not a good 5 cards either.
No, Tinker with no artifacts versus double Force of Will. I didn't see the first hand. What did Luis mulligan?
It had an Oath, but it also had a Blightsteel Colossus. I can't remember if it had 0 lands or 1.
Yeah, the 6-card hand looked like it was Lotus Oath with nothing else.
Right.
Luis's deck is the more inconsistent of the 2. I mean, it seems like one of the issues when you take this sort of gush fast bond engine and you start adding colors to it, you get the Haymakers in black, you get, Yawgmoth's Will, Demonic Tutor, but you also wind up with, I mean, I don't know, the deck seems like it's doing enough different things that sometimes it draws half of this and half of that.
Yeah, I mean, he needed to draw some combination of both mana and spells, I think, is the starting point. Like, this
obviously the starting point, sure, but I mean, it's
2 more cards. Any 2, whatever they are, with, a couple lands, Dig Through Time, Tinker, Flusterstorm is perfectly reasonable. No matter what the other 2 cards are, you're going to have a hand that is going to be decent. Like,
sure.
Obviously, drawing multiple hands with no lands.
Look, I'm not saying Steve's deck is better. I'm just saying Steve's deck is more consistent. I mean, I think Steve's top end is a lot lower, but his bottom end is a lot higher. Right? I don't know.
I partially agree with you. I think that it gets skewed a little bit in a lot of our heads by the fact that Luis keeps drawing Gristlebrand and Blightsteel Colossus, which I don't know how inconsistent it makes your deck to have 2 giant things in it. I mean, obviously you've played a lot of Oath in your day, so you know that the Gristlebrand is in your hand that often. Of course it comes up. That is the cost of playing these cards that you don't want to draw, but
right. He draws it infinitely more often than Menendian does.
That is accurate. And also almost infinitely more than everyone else who's playing those cards. It's just drawn it a lot. Luis just looking for time. Menendian obviously hitting his land drops, which is pretty fortunate for him. Had a 1-lander himself with quite a bit of disruption. Really need to find some mana sources to be able to not be discarding. Like, discarding is going to let Luis get back in this game.
Interesting. So Menendian did not go for Brainstorm. He cracked his fetch lands, presumably because he wants to go on a cruise?
I think he's going for Pyromancer with Pyroblast backup and then going to start trying to cascade that advantage.
Yeah, he does go for Pyromancer.
Of course, against Luis's 5-card hand, Steve's hand completely stacked as we have seen. It's going to be effective. The young Pyromancer is going to close the door pretty fast.
What's Luis up to? Gushing? Do you fight this if you're Steve?
Probably, just because he's so far ahead. Pyroblast, of course, making a token, still has multiple Force of Wills back up. Like, he really has no other use for that that mana. It's not like he has a Flusterstorm or something that he might need to close the door. So his Force of Wills are going to be the disruption he has.
Yeah, and now if you're Luis, do you use a Flusterstorm here? It's got to be tempting.
Yeah, I mean, as he falls further behind, I guess he's probably going to feel the need that he needs the cards. And, you know, if he hits an artifact and you can kind of just hope that Steve doesn't have 2 Force of Wills. I mean, of course, Steve's hand is kind of not perfect, but
those are cards.
Yeah,
Ancestral Recall Yawgmoth's Will. That's not bad.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you just Ancestral yourself. It's not going to work, but he's got a Force of Will to defend it with. This is clearly the right line for Luis.
Right, and it will turn on Dig Through Time once the dust clears. But it will also...
Oh, Steve's going to gush as a response. That's interesting.
We'll leave Steve with a bunch of tokens and then get to cast Treasure Cruise.
Wow, he drew 3rd Force of Will.
Yeah,
and Mental Misstep. He just gushed into Mental Misstep plus a Force of Will.
Yeah, I mean...
That's pretty ridiculous.
I've seen no shortage of perfect draw steps, and that's insane, yeah. Those are probably the exact 2 cards you want. If not, I mean, Misdirection would have been better, Force of Will. But yeah, this is insane.
Crazy. Luis thinking about a Force of Will on that misstep here. He's just like, if dude has Force of Will, I'm going to lose anyway. I may as well.
Well, the bigger concern is, of course, the misdirection. She's facing an 8-card hand, and so if you Force of Will and then get your Ancestral misdirected, it's over. But he figures if Steve has any other counter, if his draw is, you know, he needs to fight through at least. He needs to hope that Steve only has 1 counter, basically, so that the Yawgmoth's Will can do something next turn. Although even that's not possible. He doesn't have enough mana to do anything, so he just kind of has to hope that Steve's hand's not insane, and
Steve's hand is insane,
or that his hand is terrible, basically, and his hand is completely perfect.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the way Luis played this.
No.
I guess it could have been better. That gush could have gotten to the misdirection. That would have been, yeah.
It would have been highly unnecessary, but yes, even better. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if we were playing one match, we could certainly argue about whether, you know, Luis had to mulligan, but his deck is more inconsistent, and Menendian's deck is more consistent, and who's the better player in this step. But 5 matches, we get to keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I think Menendian's draws have been better in the full set. I mean, they've clearly been better in this match.
Yeah.
Across the full set, I guess they've been better. I don't know. Luis has had some decent ones.
I think they've been exponentially better in 5 of the last 6 games. The other game Luis won, and one of the games he just stole that he should have never won. But
fair. I think we'll play 2 more, though.
So yeah, you're already calling Luis as the winner in match 4? Yes. Steve's draw was, of course, horrendous in game 1 of this set. The Mull to 5, and actually his Mull to 5 was good, but Luis's draw was actually great that time. So if they got to mix and match a little bit, where Luis got his great draw against one of Steve's, you know, good draws, we could have had something really exciting. Of course, we just had 3 routes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with Luis stole a game, and you know, Steve has had Steve's way of navigating the matchup is at least open to interpretation, but I feel like Steve's deck looks better. I mean, from a deck building point of view, Luis's deck just does have more mulligans in it. It's probably drawn below average, but it's also going to have more draws that have to be mulliganed. It just is less consistent. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Luis is very capable, I think, of coming back and winning 2 straight here, but that's what he's going to have to do. Steve Menendian has piloted his Delver deck. He knows this deck inside and out. He knows how he wants to play it in various situations, and he's got Luis Scott Vargas pushed back against the wall.
Fact. Agree.
Wow. Good times. These are fun matches. We have gone the full 3 games every time. Yeah, you got to pick Luis for match 4 here.
Yeah.
More magic, more magic, more magic.
I think you're obsessed. I think you have an addiction,
Randy.
I think you're addicted to games.
This is a fact.
I can understand it. I feel a little similarly. Crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that I've been watching our personal chat, and Menendian has definitely. I basically told those guys they could take 5 minutes between matches. We're not going to take another break here because it's me and Eric for the long haul. I only lined up 3 commentators. Eric is our closer, so no need for you doing all right? You don't need 5 minutes. Menendian is taking full advantage of the 5 minutes between matches.
I'm pretty confident that Luis has never wanted 5 minutes in his life. I mean, unless like the ice cream truck is rolling through and needs to go chase it down. But other than that, he's ready to play more Magic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's becoming a bit of an endurance. Do you think, mental fatigue kicks in at some point for these guys?
It's entirely possible. I mean, they both have real jobs. They both, got up early this morning and went to work, I'm pretty sure. So
True.
I personally don't know what that feels like, as I've never done it in my life. Yeah, I feel like there's no number of rounds that you can throw at Luis Scott Vargas where he's going to get fatigued on Magic. The guy is absolutely an Iron Warrior playing Magic. Now, waking up early and having to go to work, and who knows what happened at work, and who knows what his day was like, and all this stuff, maybe, But if you're like, Luis, you have to go play 15 matches, like, all right, I'll play 15 matches.
I feel like this is a place, maybe even another place where Luis probably has an edge. I think that Luis has played more intense, sort of pressure-filled and long days of Magic than Steve has. It's just, as a vintage specialist, this is about as big of a match as Steve's ever had to play at any point in his career. Winning the Vintage World Championships, probably better, although the audience was a lot smaller, right? The number of people watching his hand was dramatically smaller.
That's true.
I don't know which of those is a higher pressure event, right?
No, I certainly don't know either.
I think Luis has a lot more experience with that, and I actually think that could help him here.
Yeah. I'm also not sure, this is kind of interesting, I'm interested on your take on this, who would feel more pressured to win this match? I know that Luis really cares about winning, and I can't imagine Steve feels any less, and so I'm not sure who feels the bigger burden, Luis being the superstar Hall of Famer, 5 Pro Tour top 8s, top 5 players of all time, or Steve being the representative for Vintage. I'm wearing Vintage on my back. This is my format. I'm going up against one of the best players of all time. Who has the pressure? Like, does Steve not have the pressure because he's playing someone of Luis's caliber, or does he have more pressure because he's the Vintage player? I personally don't know.
I think Menendian feels a little more pressure here.
I'm curious what the chat thinks about that one too.
Yeah, no, I would.
I think you get vastly different opinions from people.
What do you guys think out there in the chat? Who's got more pressure on their shoulders right now? Coming into the match anyway. Obviously there's more pressure on Luis right now because he's down 2-1. Menendian's got to be feeling a little better. He only needs to win one of the last 2. Little room to give. But coming into the match, who had more pressure? Who was feeling the weight of the world?
Yeah, I don't think it was going to be a small amount for either of them, but I have no idea.
I see LSV, Menendian, LSV, Menendian, LSV. Definitely split, kind of like we are. By far, yeah. Let's go watch. Steve Menendian leads 2 matches to 1. It's best 3 out of 5. So Menendian needs to win 1 match to be our inaugural Vintage Super League champion. Luis is going to have to rattle off 2 straight.
That is true. We have seen Luis come back from down matches and top 8s before in best of 5s. A couple pretty big ones.
Yeah. Yeah, the Pro Tour that he won, he was down 0-2, right?
Yep. In round 1 in a matchup that they deemed basically unwinnable. Kind of just
Yeah.
gave up on testing, I believe. The matchup was so bad. And then Luis just falls down a quick 0-2. It's like, yeah, it was as bad as we thought against the Tesserator.
Comes back and wins 3 straight. Goes on to win the Pro Tour.
Yep. This is destiny.
All right, what do you make of these draws? Luis with a library.
That's the first time we've seen that card, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Menendian does run a strip mine.
True.
Is it Luis on the play? Yeah, Luis on the play. Library on the play is, I mean, it's still fine. Not as good. And Menendian should just lead Delver here, right?
Yeah, I mean, no oaths in the deck. There's no reason to ever hold back your threats now, right?
Yeah, this is a game 1. This is a new match from a Magic Online and a sideboarding point of view. So Luis's Oath of Druids transformational sideboard plan is still sitting in the sideboard. Luis draws a Mox. Libraries for a card main phase.
That was a good Mox. The Mox Ruby not really very useful when you're looking at cards like Abrupt Decay. Drawing the Emerald or the Jet enables him to actually play some of his spells, which is better than not being able to play your spells.
Sure. Yeah, he goes for land, cracks the fetch land, goes for a preordain. Now, do you play a Mox here or no?
There's no reason to. Like, it doesn't do anything, and he is playing Storm, and this is something that Luis, I guess, has talked about a lot, that people tend to like to play their Moxes, where it's just doesn't make sense to do so. Like in this matchup, he can't get punished. He's not going to get Thoughtseize. He's not going to cast Force of Will or Mental Misstep. So, the big mistakes people make are playing their Moxes in spots where that can happen, and you get blown off your library. That's not going to happen here. But there's just also no reason to play the Mox. Like, he may not even want to play the Mox next turn. Like, he may just
this is kind of... He's not going to have a lot of turns to milk that library, though. That Young Pyromancer... I mean, Delver flipped. Young Pyromancer got added to the board. Luis gets 2 more turns?
Well, he has Abrupt Decay. That's going to kill something.
Sure. And Tropical and Underground will let him kill something. Huh.
Demonic Tutor
Fastball
just lets him go off. Of course, he hasn't seen the hand of Menendian, but should he find some sort of disruption, Demonic Tutor for Black Lotus enables him to play 8 mana into Yawgmoth's Will, into recasting Demonic Tutor, and just winning the game, I believe. But, of course...
He's got no permission, though.
Right, and he hasn't seen Steve's hand, so...
Yeah, he's just going to Abrupt Decay the Young Pyro.
There.
Funny. This is almost a... There's not even a good misdirection target here, interestingly.
Right.
So yeah, Young Pyromancer down. That will buy Luis significantly more time to continue milking his library, and he does, in fact, seem to have all the tools he needs in his hand to sculpt an awesome Yawgmoth's Will turn.
Yeah, Steve's last 2 draws were probably about the most perfect they could be. Gosh, of course he can just cast, but either way, it's a blue card, and then second Force of Will. Exactly what he wants.
There's the Gush. That's going to resolve. I don't think Luis would fight it even if he had the tools to.
Right.
Trigon and a Mystical.
Yeah, not the best hits there. Of course, Mystical can fetch Ancestral, and Trigon is not the worst because it is a blue card. Actually, because he used the Gush, then the Mystical, I guess, will be his second blue card.
Menendian uses his floating mana to throw a lightning bolt at Luis's face, so Luis is actually down to 10 already.
Yeah, and he can get knocked down to 1 on the next turn.
Now, if you're Luis, is it time? Is he looking at 3 plus maybe that Delver flips, plus maybe there's another lightning bolt? I better go for it now?
Entirely possible. Yes, Steve hitting a bunch of blue cards is... And, of course, drawing the Force of Will this turn is not where he needs to be. But, all right, there's step 1. Yeah, it looks like Luis is just going to... Well, I guess he gets to draw off library if he wants it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he put 2 cards on top. He knows what
there's the Tendrils.
Wow, so can he get enough mana that he can get the Yawgmoth's Will countered and still
Second
cast Tendrils?
black is the tough part.
Oh, yeah, good point.
He doesn't have... I mean, it's actually the third black, because you need to... Oh, DT for Lotus. That's how you do it.
Because Steve has double Force of Will, I'm not sure this works. If Luis actually casts his Force of Will, Steve, if he flips Delver, will have lethal.
I think Luis is correct to go for it, though. I mean, his opponent's on 1 mana.
I agree. I mean, he doesn't have to do anything after this Demonic Tutor gets countered. I don't see
Interesting.
a real situation where he doesn't do something, but...
All right, we were having this conversation with Bob and Chris about, do you Force of Will Demonic Tutor, or do you wait to Force of Will the thing that they're going to go get?
Yeah.
Menendian forces the DT itself. And Luis forces back.
Right, because Luis is forcing back, it kind of signals to Steve that, all right, I should be forcing.
This is a big deal. Yeah, this Demonic Tutor is important. It's actually not that important, though. I mean, if this Delver doesn't flip, Luis might get a turn to Yawgmoth's Will.
Right.
No Lotus in the graveyard because the Demonic Tutor is successfully countered. Menendian throws 2 Force of Wills at it. If he flips this Delver, the game's over. Sure. But if the Delver doesn't flip, then Luis is going to get another turn.
Right. If Steve just draws a land.
Yeah, most of his spells are good, for sure. Does the Delver flip? No, Scalding Tarn is the card off the top.
So, yeah, Luis is going to win this game, right?
I think, can he get 8
Yep.
spells? He probably can, right? He goes Crypt, Mox, Soul Ring, Yawgmoth's Will. That's 4. Surely there's 3 spells out of the graveyard, especially when one of them's a Demonic Tutor.
Right, he's going to get to Demonic Tutor for...
Wow. Steve spent all his permission on the Demonic Tutor and couldn't stop the Yawgmoth's Will. If he just lets Black Lotus happen, he fights the fight over the Yawgmoth's Will, then he wins.
Yeah, if he let Demonic Tutor happen and took the fight over Black Lotus, yeah, there's no way for Luis to get the black mana he needs. That I can think of.
No, I think that this is the problem, that sometimes you fight over Demonic Tutor, and that wasn't the place to pick the fight. Yawgmoth's Will was the card he really needed to stop from happening.
Well, Black Lotus, even. I mean, the thing was...
I mean, you can let the Black Lotus happen. If you stop the Yawgmoth's Will, you win.
I can't remember how much mana Luis had at the time, whether he could let the Black Lotus happen, counter the Yawgmoth's Will... No, it's the same thing. If he counters the Black Lotus, then Luis can... But doesn't flip Delver, Luis gets a turn. No, my point being, if Steve just chose to fight over the Yawgmoth's Will,
yep,
instead of the Black Lotus, what would have happened, I'm pretty sure, no, I'm sure, it has to be, is that the Black Lotus is in play. Luis's hand was Mox, Mana Crypt, Soul Ring. That's 5 mana. So
sure,
when he just casts Yawgmoth's Will, Steve counters it, and then Luis casts the Tendrils, and it's going to be lethal. Because he's cast like Spell, Demonic Tutor, Black Lotus.
Oh, you think he could have Tendrils killed?
Mox, Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Tendrils. It's going to be a 20-point Tendrils.
Yeah, but Luis would have gone for it last turn. If you let Demonic Tutor resolve. So Luis Scott Vargas does win the game. Yawgmoth's Will gave him all the Storm County needed. Tendrils wins the game. So Luis is up a game. They're now sideboarding for game 2. Luis may have stolen one there. So here's what I'm saying. If, let's say Steve just lets Demonic Tutor resolve, right? Luis gets Black Lotus. We agree with that. Luis is going to play his Black Lotus on that turn. Mm-hmm. He's not going to count on getting to untap 100%. Because he's 1 Delver flip from dead.
Well, plus he wanted the Storm count. He already had the Tendrils in hand.
Right, but I don't think the Tendrils is...
My point being the Yawgmoth's Will on that turn, on the DT turn, was the bait.
No, he's out of mana. He has to sack the Black Lotus just to cast the Yawgmoth's Will. He only had 1 black mana. He spends it on the Demonic Tutor. He's basically tapped out. He's going to play Black Lotus and sack it for Yawgmoth's Will. He's all in on the Yawgmoth's Will. He has 0 mana
Black
left.
Lotus, and he's going to cast Mana Crypt. If the Black Lotus resolves, he plays Mana Crypt, sacks it for black, uses Mana Crypt to play Yawgmoth's Will with 2 black floating, and then
he's got black floating
Soul Ring,
and 2 Moxes in his hand?
Yeah, he had 2 Moxes, Mana Crypt, Soul Ring.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
So if the key was Steve had to fight over Black Lotus, which is not an easy line to go for. If he fights over Demonic Tutor, then he wins if he flips Delver. If he fights over Yawgmoth's Will, he loses on the spot. If he fights over Black Lotus, he wins the game.
Huh. I think I agree with you. Well, Menendian failed to flip his Delver, and he fought over apparently the middle of the three options, given the way the cards played out. Right. So Luis, maybe he stole a game, maybe he earned it with clever sequencing. Whatever the case, Luis is up a game here in match number 4. Mana Crypt into a Time Walk. Always an interesting line. How lucky is he with the Mana Crypt flips?
He was lucky against me, but I don't know what he's getting for what it's worth.
Yeah, neither do I.
Could be as simple as land. It could be, yeah, it is land, but it could have been a myriad of things. Ancestral. Ancestral is so rough against Steve Menendian in general, but even worse when he's got all his Pyroblasts in. I guess he doesn't actually board in much. His main deck is already filled with Pyroblasts and Flusterstorms and Misdirections. He's basically just boarding in the one Pyroblast as the only additional threat against these blue cards, but it is a real threat. Of course, Steve doesn't know that land is simply what Luis got here.
True. Luis loses the Mana Crypt flip.
All right, well, that's a card.
Jace is a very good card.
Get on Gush.
Floats 2, goes for the Gush.
Reasonable.
Interesting. Steve picks this time to Ancestral himself.
Well, with Flusterstorm in hand, this is insane, right? Well, I guess Luis has mana floating, but being able to Flusterstorm 2 spells at once is a big game.
Oh, wow. You're saying if Luis goes for Force of Will here, Menendian will be able to Flusterstorm both the Force and Luis's Gush. Luis does not fall into that trap. Lets the Ancestral resolve.
In general, that'll be able to happen. Of course, Luis has 2 mana floating and a Mana Crypt, so he actually can pay for the Flusterstorms, but that is something that I think a lot of people don't think about. It came up for me a number of times just in this Legacy Grand Prix this weekend. It's just not something that is on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. This Jace.
Yeah, Steve can't let that happen.
The Flusterstorm put a stop to that one.
Steve forces, Luis forces back, and now it's time for Flusterstorm. And there's the Flusterstorm. It's going to work. Both players kind of out of gas. Not completely. Steve can go Young Pyro into Gush, and Luis has got to dig through time lurking as soon as he can get 2 blue mana back into play.
So they both kind of have the best cards possible in their decks, but also they're kind of land heavy right now. Or mana source heavy.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the best collection of cards in each of their decks, each of their draws just canceled each other out. I don't know. Steve's position looks pretty solid here, though.
Yeah, it is.
He's got Young Pyro. I don't know if he's going to go Young Pyro and Delver. He's obviously been playing, terrified of Oath of Druids happening to him and very afraid in post-sideboarded games to put creatures into play. At least that was true early, and then that wasn't working for him, so maybe he's updated his way of playing.
Once you have the Young Pyro in play, there's kind of no reason to not get more creatures in play.
Yeah, no, you just go for it at that point.
And of course, Luis is already racing his own Mana Crypt.
All true. Yeah, even if Luis did have an Oath here, Steve would just be sitting on his Nature's Claim.
Right.
All right. Well, Luis does not have an Oath, so he wants to slow down the Young Pyromancer beats. Menendian would prefer to keep them beats, so he gushes as a response, makes a token, doesn't come up with a way to fight the Abrupt Decay, but does come up with a Cage and a Cruise.
Well, he's not going to use a misdirection and a blue card to move the Abrupt Decay, certainly not to Mana Crypt or to Delver of Secrets. He could move it to an elemental token, but using 2 cards for that when misdirection's already going to be so strong in the matchup is kind of just sounds bad to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, just casting the Gush just to get the token because he's going to cast Gush next turn anyway, so I think he just wants the 1/1. It is a real claw when there's Mana Crypt in play, especially. And Treasure Cruise and Graphic Escapes both really good.
Yeah, Strip Mine's not terrible either.
No, absolutely not.
Steve failed to flip his Delver, drew the Strip Mine.
Right.
So it's only 2 points of beatdown here, but Menendian holding a Grafdigger's Cage, a Treasure Cruise, and a Nature's Claim to go with his land. Luis on Dig Through Time, Abrupt Decay, Preordain. Crunch is over for 2. Strip Mine is always scary against a deck that's got Gush in it.
Yes.
I mean, when the guy gushes to save his land from a Strip Mine, it just feels like such a catastrophe.
It does, but not when you have 4 points of damage coming through a turn and a Mana Crypt in play. Setting them back to no lands, like if I can have my opponent just return their 2
Oh wow! Look at that truth.
I would do it in a heartbeat.
That was a boat full of gold Steve Menendian just drew. 2 forces and a ponder.
I think the worst cruise that Menendian's taken that I've seen so far is 2 perfects, but not too surprised to see the full 3.
So you would Strip Mine here just because even if you run into Gush, you set him back 2 land drops?
I'm saying I would in general. Like there's some chance he just wants to cast Ponder or Cage. Both are completely reasonable. I think I would lean on Cage actually here.
I like the Cage.
The way you're pitching this game is probably sure with some kind of backup. I mean, you're not losing this game, it turns out, because, well, very unlikely. But I think I would go Cage here and have Force of Will up.
Steve plays the Strip Mine, and he goes for the Tropical. There is no Gush, so he just plain kills the Tropical. Now he's got a discard, right? That's 8 cards.
Yeah, he's got plenty of lands. Just fuel for the next cruise.
He draws a land.
Better than John.
Yeah, time to dig through time, right? Surely Menendian's going to counter this one.
Yep.
Maybe not surely. I mean, he has to. It would be his only Force of Will. He doesn't have the second blue card to go with the second Force, so. Still, it seems like you know that's going to turn into 2 awesome cards. It seems like you have to force it.
Yeah, not counting Dig Through Time is definitely playing with some serious fire.
Yeah, I mean, he tried that line in match 2.
It's a slightly different situation based on his hand having 2 counters out and him feeling like he was in a pretty comfortable spot because misdirection resolving. So the Oath was going to be off the table, and that's where his focus was. But yeah,
he's thinking about it.
It definitely ended up not working out for him in that particular game. Yeah, I can't see him not countering. You might be thinking about what to pitch. I mean, the Force of Will is a dead card if he doesn't draw a blue card. And Ponder could be a Treasure Cruise. Or
so
even something.
He pitches the Force of Will, yeah. That makes sense.
I mean, Luis is losing these flips too, so he could be on a quick clock.
Gets yet another inconsistent card from Luis's deck. I don't know. I mean, look, my heart wants to cheer for the fellow Hall of Famer somehow, but I really like the way Steve's put this deck together. I haven't agreed with all of his decisions, but he knows this format better than I do, so whatever. The scoreboard defense seems pretty good here from Steve Menendian's camp. Delver does flip. Delver and the token. Chunk for 4. Luis is just about dead.
Yeah, he lost yet another flip, so that will finish this one off. I mean, he gets to dig. I don't know what he wants to find.
I mean, he has to tap his mana crypt mana to dig. He's only got 4 cards to delve.
Right, but I mean, even if he had, I mean, obviously he had all the
Right.
mana in the world, he'd be fine. But there's not really
Yeah.
much for. He can't activate Oath. Even if he gets Blightsteel out, he still just dies to this Insectile aberration because he lost all his flips. So
Of course we're going to game 3. Of course we're going to game 3. Yeah, he's not going to bother with the dig. He's going to go Preordain. If there's a miracle, be there.
the magnitude
Doesn't find anything.
Bad draws getting amplified in the chat as you continually see people say how much mana is in Luis's deck and how little mana is in Luis's deck. All right, well, it's definitely one of those. Oh, wait.
Game 3, Menendian looks like he insta-submitted, and Luis is already submitted. So this game 3, we don't even need to leave the screen.
It does look like that has been the case. Although I do think we need to leave the screen. Or
Oh, we have to leave the screen because of the bug, right?
Sorts of bad things.
Yeah, there is a bug when you're observing matches in Magic Online that if you don't exit the game before the next game starts, you can't observe. I hope that doesn't.
The last bug in all of Magic Online, though. So.
What's that?
It's the very last bug on all of Magic Online, so nothing really to worry about.
Well, it's not exactly a high priority fix, right?
No.
If you're observing, so our spotter's going to have to quit and log back into Magic Online. So we'll be a minute. Yeah, the bug, in case you ever, we don't have to necessarily watch him come back in, but that's fine. If you're observing a game and the next game of the match starts while you're still observing the previous one, Magic Online gets confused and you have to quit Magic Online to and restart the client. So we'll get that taken care of and get you game number 3. So, right, best 3 out of 5 matches. It's match 4. If Steve Menendian wins one more game of Magic, he's the champ. That's all he's got to do. He's up 2-1. He's forced a game 3, 1 game of Magic away from being the Vintage Super League champion.
True.
Luis has to win this one, and then he's got to win the next match.
Not as good a spot to be, but
no,
a better spot than I'm in. So.
Yeah, me too. I don't know whether I barely escaped last or I almost made the playoffs. It felt like I think both things are true.
Whichever one you feel like on any given day.
Now I know that you guys, when you and Luis were working on this deck, you felt like you had a huge advantage on Delver, or you felt like...
Oh, no. I mean, I feel like this match is quite advantaged in Luis's favor, and by quite advantage, I mean it's a little better than a coin flip. I mean, we're talking about a Delver deck. Like, this deck is just good against everything. That's why it's the deck that it is. It's why a lot of pros will choose this type of deck, because you're going to have an advantage in the mirror where you play better, and you're not going to be buried in any matchup, which is exactly where you want to be to really be able to focus your skill set when you're a good player. There's a lot of play to the deck, as we've certainly seen. The exact same thing is true in other formats, such as Legacy. There's a lot of play to the Blue-Red Delver deck, and it's a very strong deck, and it's why people play it. And, of course, Treasure Cruise has made the deck, it's completed the deck, I guess. If, for lack of a better word, it's just incredibly strong and, shores up some of the disadvantages of playing cards that don't necessarily always do anything, like Ponder and Preordain better than Ponder, but Ponder a lot of times is just 1 blue mana and shuffle your deck, draw a card. That's pretty common, or draw 1 good card and 1 bad card, and lots of things like that. There's a lot of situations where a card like Ponder is not going to be worth its 1 mana investment, and being able to turn on things like Treasure Cruise changes that dramatically. Makes all these cantrips a lot better, where the deck can sometimes suffer from lack of threats and drawing too much fluff, which leads to you being flooded despite playing a deck with 16 mana sources. It happens, a lot in Legacy. I've seen it certainly was a common theme this weekend at the Grand Prix, and I certainly assume that Vintage is susceptible to a similar problem. But Treasure Cruise just makes the deck.
Fair enough. I don't know. I guess I came into this thinking Luis would have a bigger edge than he appears to me to have from a deck point of view. I mean, I do think, Luis is a great player. I mean, if I had to pick it based on play skill, yeah, I'm going to come down on the Luis side of things. But Steve's knowledge of the format seems like it's really played out from a deck matchup advantage point of view. I don't see Luis having the deck edge that I thought he was going to have.
I mean, I think we would see something pretty different if we played a best of 50 instead of a best of 5. Like, I do feel like the draws have not been close. I mean, we certainly haven't seen Luis with a draw a fraction as good as any of the draws he had against me last week.
He did he had a turn 1 kill. Well, effectively. He had a turn 1 tinker.
That draw, like I said, was also just not even a good draw.
It was sketchy.
It ended up being great, but
it worked out. It was
saying, like I said,
I do.
If that draw was on the draw, his hand is completely unkeepable. So I mean, it is what it is. Like he kind of went. He had an all in hand that was
that worked out.
That's fair. And actually, the one hand, like I really don't think that tinker hand was anything special. And you guys were debating mulliganing it, which is completely reasonable. The one time that Steve mulliganed to 5, that was the one hand where Luis's hand was insane. He also had that soul ring tinker, tutor hand. That hand was pretty insane.
Sure.
And of course, he ended up not winning till turn 4 or 5 or whatever it was. But that was just because, being a huge favorite into 100% favorite instead of just going
all 3 abrupt decays.
Yeah, classic Luis.
They're not awful in this matchup. I mean, they do kill all the creatures in addition to killing the cages.
No, they're quite good, which is why he boarded in the 3rd copy. It's just
sure
you need to draw things in moderation. Like you can't Steve's deck's not looking so hot if his draw is just 4 young pyromancers, a cage, and an island. Like it's a good draw for Steve again.
So how do you play this hand if you're Steve Menendian?
That Vex land is, another perfect draw. The thing is, you have Brainstorm with Fetchland, but your hand is insane. Like, there's nothing in there he doesn't want. So I think you just run out the Pyromancer, and then you have double Force of Will backup. If that doesn't work, you have Grafdigger's Cage, if you're getting Oath. And if that doesn't work, you still have Treasure Cruise. Like, all this stuff is on.
Yeah, so he cracks the fetch land, runs out the Young Pyromancer, which works. Luis is going to Abrupt Decay that Young Pyromancer. It's got to be a little bit in fear of a misdirection here, blowing up his Soul Ring. That would be kind of a beating, but Mr. Misdirection does not have it this time.
Yeah, I mean, the Force of Will, of course, is going to make him feel a little bit better about that play. Another perfect top.
Replacement Young Pyro off the top.
Which means I think he just goes Pyromancer, Gush, and then plays Grafdigger's Cage, assuming he doesn't draw anything. So, lots more perfects from an Indian. Yep.
I don't know, I feel like I want to think of Vintage as being about these explosive, super powerful, ridiculous things, and Menendian's deck is just all the cards are good. It doesn't seem to even matter which ones you draw. Like, there's basically never been any point in the match where he's had a bad card in his hand.
10 of his 12 hands.
Pardon?
And he said 2 Force of Wills in 10 of his 12 hands. Like, it's not going to make
but it's not like there are no bad cards anywhere in his deck. Every card is good in basically every situation.
Well, Delver and Trigon are both pretty bad. Young Pyromancer is not good in a lot of situations. Treasure Crew is not good unless you turn it on. I mean, yes and no. Like, yes, every draw he's had when you have all the Force of Will backups and the Young Pyromancer and you draw the land every turn you need it, it's going to look great. Yeah, but, I mean, the sequence of his draws has made the draws look even more insane than they have been. And they've been insane.
Thoughtseize runs into a mental misstep, which throws off a Young Pyromancer token. Elemental coming out. Luis is going to misstep back. He would love to actually resolve that Thoughtseize. You can't. This isn't worth forcing, is it?
I don't think so.
I mean, I guess that giving Luis information about what's in your hand is...
That's a thing. For sure.
I don't know. I think you let this resolve. I don't think it's worth pitching 2 cards. Pitching an extra card just to deny the information. Steve thinking about it. All right, lets it resolve, and Luis chooses the Treasure Cruise. Now what? Luis has got 1 Abrupt Decay left. Point that at the Young Pyro, slow the clock down to 2 tokens? Or go through Dig Through Time? Go for Dig Through Time.
Yeah, you have to go through Dig Through Time now because he knows his opponent's hand, and if he lets him untap, the Pyroblast is turned on, and the Dig can't resolve.
Sure.
So this is his last opportunity to cast the Dig Through Time.
Yeah, and he also knows that he wins this Force of Will fight.
Right. He's facing a fast clock, though. I mean, it's going to be at least 5 damage a turn, and you're still going to be facing, I believe, Brainstorm and Pyroblast, which is going to make more tokens.
Yeah, I mean, Luis is expecting Steve to force, and I think Steve kind of knows Luis is expecting him to force, so Steve suspects Luis can force back, but I don't know, from Steve's perspective, maybe Luis is desperate here, and even forcing him to use his Force of Will is decent.
Yeah. These hands just kind of play themselves. This is desperation mode for Luis. There's not too much he can do. I'm trying to think of what his...
I mean, he gets to resolve his Dig.
Yes, I'm trying to think of what his perfect 2 cards are. If you just had double Demonic Tutor right here.
Sure.
You know, he has the Abrupt Decay to kill the cage, but Yawgmoth's Will can't really do much. His graveyard just got exiled from Dig Through Time. There's just a Time Walk in there. Nothing exciting. He knows about the Pyroblast, so I guess it involves Oath, and that's pretty much it. Like,
It's Gush and Preordain are the 2 cards.
Sure. Not even sure Oath is fast enough because he gets attacked down to 9. Steve gets to cast Brainstorm, and if he assuming he gets Darksteel Colossus, if he gets Crystal Brandy, he's in fine shape. If an Oath, came into play.
Yeah, he didn't find an Oath though. He kept Gush Preordain. Gush still hasn't found an Oath. Fires off the Thoughtseize, but now he's going to get crunched. Almost half his life goes away right here. Oath could still be good enough if it hits Grizzlebrand. It's one of these scenarios where if he hits the Blightsteel,
right,
it would not be good enough. But he has to draw an Oath right now. He does not do it.
Yeah, I was trying to think if he drew Tinker, but he knows about the Pyroblast.
Yeah, he can Preordain. I guess that's his last chance here? Wow, Steve Menendian's going to be our champ, isn't he? Luis Scott Vargas is...
He's going to get the Young Pyromancer Abrupt Decay, and it's going to buy him potentially an extra turn.
Sure.
He's going to do this in his upkeep. Steve could just blow a Pyroblast on nothing, in theory, just to speed the clock up by a turn. Look, now Steve's drawing his Colossuses, finally. But,
all right. Indian hit attacks for 3. Luis still not finding the Oath of Druids, which is the line we think he needs. Tinker might do it too. No, Tinker runs into Pyroblast. I guess Tinker with Force backup?
Force, yeah.
Yeah, Steve is going to Pyroblast this Preordain, which is pretty solid. Luis allows it. Not going to use his Force of Will on that. Elementals are going to knock Luis down to 1. Steve is going to play a backup Grafdigger's Cage.
Going to get Hercules.
Yeah. All right. Luis Scott Vargas is going to cast Hercules Recall to bounce those 2 Grafdigger's Cages, and he basically Needs to top deck. Not even Tinker's good enough.
Yawgmoth's Will into things. He gets to cast Gush if he draws Yawgmoth's Will.
He draws Jace. Does that do anything?
It's a brainstorm.
It's a brainstorm. Yeah, it's a very expensive brainstorm.
You can draw Black Lotus Yawgmoth. You could draw
Jace
Gush,
says
something.
Wow. Blightsteel, misstep. That is not going to do it. Steve Menendian wins the Vintage Super League. Congratulations to Steve Menendian. 3 matches to 1, takes down the Hall of Famer Luis Scott Vargas. Wow. I mean, you can say that his draws were good, and yeah, they probably were, but I'm going to say that his deck was good, and I'm also going to say that his play was plenty good.
Well, I don't want to take a thing away from Steve. He played well. His deck's fantastic. I mean,
yeah,
definitely a deck that anyone can pick up and play immediately. Yeah, congrats to Steve.
Absolutely. Came in as the vintage specialist. We had Platinum Pros. We had Hall of Famers. Everybody kind of gunning for this format. And yeah, Steve showed you specialize in a format. You get really good at it, and he is really good at it. All right, so I want to bring Steve in. We're going to talk to him. Don't go away. We're going to talk to Steve, and I'm sure he's a very happy man right now. So, Eric, I appreciate you hanging out with us for these last couple matches of the finals. We'll let you go. I'm going to sort of remind everybody of the bracket of how we got here, and we will bring Steve in for a winner interview. See you, Eric. All right, here was the playoffs. Here's how we got here. Eric and Dave Williams tied at 5 and 4. They got into the playoffs as the number 4 seed. It was Eric with the same 75 cards you just watched Luis play, taking out Dave Williams. So Dave Williams finishes 4th in Vintage Super League Season 1. Eric Froelich goes to the semifinals, where he then played the mirror match against Eric. Mirror match for Eric and Luis. It was Luis who won it, through to the finals, and we just watched it right here. Luis Scott Vargas playing best of 5 matches against Steve Menendian. Luis wins. You know what? He stole one. He got one that we weren't sure he was supposed to get, but Menendian was not going to be denied. The vintage specialist rattles off 3 wins in 4 matches to take the title. Crazy. All right, yeah, we are attempting to get Steve added to the call so that we can talk to him. I know that he's definitely just been through an endurance fight here. He's been playing Magic at, maximum peak brain power. He's been playing against one of the best players in the history of the game. I mean, make no mistake about it. Luis Scott Vargas is one of the best players in the history of Magic. And now he's going to be ready for the call. Jeez. Hope you guys have enjoyed that out there. This has been a lot of fun. 2 awesome players. The whole league's been full of awesome players. We've had awesome matches. We finally had a first turn kill last week, even if it wasn't a show match. Steve, are you there?
I'm here.
Congratulations, man. How's it feel?
I'm tired, man.
Tired? Not elated? Excited? You did it. That's got to feel great.
It does. I don't feel it yet. It was just I was an endurance race, and I don't think I could have done a 5th match. So
really,
I'm beat. I was pouring tea and food down my throat in between matches to keep my energy going. So I don't.
Okay. So tea, that was the answer? The secret weapon?
Yeah, I've got my chamomile. I've gone through 3 tea bags and about 4 pots. And I've made some, a bunch of little snacks in between. But yeah, I mean, that was an endurance race. And I think, I suspect LSV has more stamina than I do when it comes to these sorts of things, especially on a high level stage. I felt out of sorts the entire match. Like, I never felt like I was winning. I never got into a good rhythm.
Okay.
So, I lost track of what games we were in, like who was winning. I just it was just a chaotic mess in my head.
Awesome. Well, it's over, and you did win. You won 3-1. There were some scary moments in there. I mean, all 4 of the matches played.
Randy, we played matches.
Yeah, you won 3 matches. There were all 4 of our matches went to 3 games. It was a lot of fun to watch. I mean, it certainly has been a treat to watch you, not just in this match, but the whole season.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. I mean, to be honest, I think I've learned a lot from this, especially from LSV.
Okay.
You know, I felt like there were a lot of the times that there was one game where I was just like super control roll, and eventually I decided to play a Delver.
Yep.
And you know, actually, let me just start with this. He surprised me out of the gate. I did some testing against his deck, and I did not expect him to keep in Tinker post board. So very early on, he pitched Tinker to Force of Will, and I was completely thrown off. So in one of the early matches, I thought, oh my gosh, he's not playing Oath because he has Tinker. Mm-hmm. So I was bottoming cards that are good against Oath, not realizing that he still had the Oaths. So I think that might have even been the first match. And then at some point, he Force of Will pitching a Notion Thief, which really blew my mind. So, you know, he was such a master of being patient. And in that game, I thought I had it won. You know, the game where I had outdrawn him massively.
Right.
I felt like I was miscuing here and there. I felt like he knew exactly what to do and I didn't. You know, it was just, I never felt like I got into a groove, you know, a good rhythm. And then the game that the moment I thought I had a good rhythm, I think I misplayed forcing the Demonic Tutor, and he just like blew me out. And for some reason, I thought I had 6 damage on the table, but my second Delver hadn't flipped. Right. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to Mystical for Time Walk or a Bolt. But anyway, I'll have to go back and look at it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt like I made some misplays, but I definitely, practicing helped me out. I wasn't, there was a point where I Flusterstormed his Flusterstorm, and I'm proud of myself that I had a read on that. And in testing, I knew he had 1 Flusterstorm in his sideboard, and so I had to play around it the whole time. And I was really debating, because that Flusterstorm after that turn is going to have almost no value, you know? So I have to decide, whether I pitch this, misdirect pitching the Force there, or whether I Fluster. And he never gave me an opportunity to 2-for-1 him with my Flusterstorm. So I mean, LSV is just a master. I felt like he definitely played superbly. I think it's safe to say he outplayed me. But I think that anyway, I'll stop and let you ask the questions.
No, you're doing great. So if you think he outplayed you, why did you win? Was it the deck choice? How was the matchup in your mind?
Well, I was so puzzled when I saw the deck because LSV knows and Eric know that I'm bringing in Cage against their deck. I mean, they're Yawgmoth's Will Tinkers. Yep. So sideboarding Oaths didn't make a lot of sense to me because it walks into my sideboard plan. And the only thing that changes is that I bring in the 1 Nature's Claim in addition to the Cages. So my sideboard plan in testing was sideboarding out the Bolts, the Ancient Grudge, and 1 Pyromancer, and bringing in all 5 of those cards.
Okay.
The card in testing that his deck beat me with over and over again was Library of Alexandria. So I felt very fortunate that he only drew Library in one of the games. And in one of the games, I just threw Strip Mine and sat it there in case he did draw an LOA.
Got it. So interesting. You felt like the transformational sideboard plan, which should be good against Delver, was actually not good, given you're going to be bringing in Grafdigger's Cage anyway, just for the Yawgmoth's Will Tinker plan.
That's right. I thought it was very strange. I think that he probably would have had just as good a luck bringing in a bunch of Notion Thieves and stuff like that. It almost plays into my plan because not only does so the battle post board, as you have by now know, is really the fight over Abrupt Decay and Hurkyl's Recall. And so, I'm trying to position myself to use my misdirections to misdirect his Abrupt Decay to his Oath, which I think I got to do once, but not nearly as many times as I wanted. Also, I mean, my version of Delver has 2 main deck Trigon Predators, which, as you can see, as you know, are really strong against that plan, inherently. So I don't think his sideboard plan is actually that strong against me at all. And, I think a lot of the things, the most things I was most concerned about were not his sideboard plan at all. But I was mostly concerned about him getting a turn 1 library and me not having a strip mine or being able to race it. And secondly, I was concerned about turn 1 tinkers.
That only happened once.
Yeah, and it got me. I think it ended one of the matches.
Yeah, it did. The first match was decided on a turn 1 tinker draw. He basically was like, "Do you have a force of will?" And you said no. And then it was time for a 5-minute break to get ready for match 2. Wow, those were great matches. What was the highlight for you looking back on it? And I don't know if I'm sure you'll go back and rewatch it. I'm sure that once you get time to catch your breath, you'll probably be talking through what you were thinking the whole time. That's always been a fun thing you've done after a lot of the matches.
I think when probably I'm not going to lump myself in with the guys that I played against, in this tournament, because they're all far better Magic players than I am. But I think when you're really a competitive Magic player, the only thing you remember are your losses. So the game that stands out to me is that really long game that reminded me of our regular season match.
Yeah, we were making that exact callback when we were doing the commentary.
And it's a very tricky thing. Do you play the Delver earlier? If you do, you can walk into an abrupt decay. And if I don't feel like I'm strong enough against the decays, if he has 1 or 2 decays, and then I was bamboozled by his plan. I didn't know what to expect at any point because he had cards in that I didn't expect him to have, like the Tinker and the Notion Thief. So I really was just in a state of confusion for most of it. I think at some point I just had to sort of stop. This is not characteristic of me, but I had to stop sort of thinking so hard and just
just play,
settle back into some sort of exactly. Just let my muscle memory take over.
Interesting. No, that totally. I think, by the way, that he was an Oath deck, but he had 1 Grizzlebrand, 1 Blightsteel because he felt like Tinker was really good against you. You basically can't remove a Resolved Blightsteel from play, so his Oath package was just 1 Grizzlebrand, 1 Blightsteel instead of 2 Grizzlebrands.
Really fascinating.
And then I think the Notion Thief was a 1 game he took out the Oath plan. I'm not sure, but like watching his hand, when I saw the Notion Thief, I was like, oh, he must not be an Oath deck this game. That was my theory anyway. I think he might have just mixed it up for that game.
Yeah, that was exactly my assumption. And then I think I did some things, and then I was like, oh no, he played Oath. So you have to sort of hedge. You're not 100% sure. What's interesting is in testing, I actually had several games against his deck, and I had a friend playing his deck where the Oath plan didn't work because I would play such a control roll until he got about 25 cards in and he wasn't able to activate the Oath. And the Bristlebrand would be at like the bottom 3 cards, or it would be, or I'd be able to ice the Bristlebrand once. So I actually really like his plan of having 3 creatures. I think that makes a lot of sense. It reduces it actually kind of, in some ways, tactically trumps my plan, of playing the hard control role.
Interesting. Yeah, the hard control role. So we were speculating that when the hard control match, you lost that second match where you had 8 counters and were discarding Delvers rather than playing them. Did that change the way you approached the matchup after that? Because it felt like you were a little more aggressive with your creatures after that point.
Yeah. No, I actually don't think so. I still had a mindset that I'm going to try and play both roles. I'm going to try and pursue. I'm not going to give him an opening. But if I draw a hand that has, in post board I only had 3 Pyromancers, but certainly in game 1s, if I had, you saw my hand, I think in the last match, it was like Delver, Pyromancer, and he played Library. And I'm like, I don't really have a choice. I've got to go all in and try and raise. But I think that it was just symptomatic of the way that the games actually played out, not a conscious shift. It was just the hands I drew and my feeling of what he was doing. So it wasn't actually a conscious shift. I still really wanted to have a strong control role.
Totally makes sense. Wow, this has been fun. I can see the smile starting. I think I see the smile starting to creep on your face. It feels like maybe the dawning realization you really did win.
Yeah,
I see like the nice island behind you. I don't know if that's where the takes you, or
I need to go there. Hang out. Before I let you go, I just gotta thank you, Randy. This has been an amazing journey. I can't believe how we had 9 regular season weeks and 3 or 4 playoff weeks. To you and your entire production crew and all the commentators, I've been so fascinated watching this, and fascinated learning from my peers like Rich and these amazing players. I mean, I've learned a lot. I mean, Dave's deck in the playoffs was awesome. Efro's deck,
2 chains, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And then certainly I'm going to go back and study some of these matches to see what else he did, and I think all the viewers probably can learn a lot too.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I'm certainly have enjoyed the whole season. How about we run it back next year? How's that sound?
Oh God.
Yeah, we're looking to start in January for season 2. We'll figure the dates out. We're still sort of negotiating with Wizards over exactly how season 2 is going to work, but I'm expecting you now. So at some point soon, you're going to have to start thinking about defending your title.
I don't want to think about that right now.
Yeah, so. You enjoy it. That seems totally fair game. For the record, by the way, people are wondering what you won. You have won first pick from a set of Power 9. Oh, by the way. It does feel very, oh, by the way. We've all invested so much time and energy and hours and attention that, but yeah, for the record, you want to take the Black Lotus? Is that the plan?
I'll snag the Lotus.
All right. I'll have to ask Luis what he wants second, but that is what we were playing for. I mean, I think we're playing to win. I mean, the title. You're the only guy who ever gets to be the first winner of the Vintage Super League. I don't know. I'm jealous. I'm sure a bunch of other people are too.
I'm sure I'll enjoy it, but just I'm gonna need some time to let it sink in. I'm still. This was just crazy, crazy matches, and I didn't know it was gonna happen at any point. It just felt like things were completely out of control. LSV was outplaying me. I was, making miscues and subtle mistakes. So I'll have to go back and see how I feel about it at the end.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it felt like your deck was just spectacular. I mean, the deck choice seemed to line up. Even when everyone thought you were likely to show up with Delver and built sideboard plans that were in theory designed to thwart your most likely deck choice, you still beat them. And I mean, it just felt like you played the whole season that way, where you showed up with decks that were just better than what other people were playing against. And I mean, the knowledge of the format, both from a deck building point of view and then from a gameplay point of view, I don't know. I mean, it was a pleasure to watch. You earned everything you ever got. So,
well, I think I had the most fun playing Doomsday.
Sure.
I definitely would have run Delver in the last 3 weeks of the regular season if the Vintage Champs wasn't coming up, But then
yeah, sure.
Rich played it and Cat was out of the bag at that point.
What are you gonna do? Well, congratulations once again. It definitely has been fun. I think we're basically done with the season, though. Once you have time, I'm sure I'll be interested to hear your take on the details of the decisions that went into those matches. But yeah, it was a great match of Magic, a great 4 matches of Magic, an excellent deck choice. All the details, the misdirections. Oh, God, the misdirections were so much fun.
I never got to misdirect an Ancestral in this match.
You got to misdirect some Abrupt Decays.
We knew, yeah, that's just not the same thing. It doesn't.
You wanted more. You only got to misdirect 3 of Luis's Ancestrals over the course of the season. 1 in the regular season, 2 in the tiebreaker. Good times.
Well, tip of the cap to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. All right, that's going to do it for Steve Menendy and for the Shotgun Lotus crew that's done a great job the whole time, for all of the commentators, for Luis and Bob and Chris and Eric. The whole season, the whole gang has been awesome. We've had a blast bringing it all to you. I'm glad you guys seem like you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back. We look forward to running it back again, starting sometime in January. So, signing off for the Vintage Super League. This is Randy Bueller. We'll see you guys next time.